Welcome to the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm your host, Chris Fedor. Ethan is not with us today, so we're going solo tonight. Throwback to my radio days. And for those that don't know, I got my start in sports talk radio. Did it for about 10 years here full-time in Cleveland. Now I just do it part-time for fun. Of course, when the Cavs season ends. During the season, it is just way too chaotic, way too much travel, way too much responsibility. I can barely keep track of what hotel room I'm in. I can barely keep track of what day it is. So when the Cavs season ends and the off season picks up, then every now and then I do some sports talk radio for fun on the side, just to kind of fill the void during the summer. So it's going to be a solo pod edition of Hey Chris tonight. We're recording this on Tuesday night, the night before the Cavs play the one-off road game in Charlotte against the Hornets. Of course, they come back. They play another game at home on Friday against the 76ers. Then they hit the road for the West Coast road trip at the end of the season. One of the tougher road trips that they're going to have on the schedule, one of the longest road trips that they have on their schedule. But a couple of opportunities here over the next couple of days against Charlotte and Philadelphia, especially with Philly in the state that it's in. Completely different team without Joel Embiid. They have fallen so far down the standings. At one point, they were third in the Eastern Conference. It seemed like it was going to be, Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. Then the Cavs, Knicks, Magic, Pacers, Heat, all of those other teams lining up behind those three. But now Philly is number 8. So that game at home for the Cavs becomes, quote unquote, winnable, more winnable than it was, when the schedule was released at the beginning of the season and the Cavs thought they were going to play a Joel Embiid-led team down the stretch with playoff seeding up for grabs and all that kind of stuff. So 2 opportunities here for the Cavs to finish out this week with a couple of wins before they head on the West Coast road trip, which is just going to be really, really difficult. Just so you remember, since tonight is the edition of Hey Chris on the podcast, if you want to get a question answered in detail in the Hey Chris podcast episode, you've got to sign up for Subtext. Become a Cavs insider. Then we send out a weekly text. We try to get the best, most original questions, and then we answer them during the edition of Hey Chris. So Subtext is your only way of doing that. We don't take those questions on X, formerly Twitter. We reserve those specifically for our Cavs insiders on Subtext so that they get first dibs. They get the shot to send in their name, their location, and the question that they have pertaining to the Cavs. And we go through all of the ones that are submitted and we pull the ones that we think you would be most interested in hearing the answer to and the ones that are the best questions, quite frankly. So if you want to sign up, $3.99 a month, 14-day free trial. Go to cleveland.com/Cavs. You can sign up. It's also free to cancel. All you have to do is text the word stop. But most people that we talk to, they love the service. They love the information, the news, the analysis, the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't always make its way to X, formerly Twitter. So again, Cavs Insider, Subtext, $3.99 a month, 14-day free trial. Let's do this. We're going to crack open my bubbly. Yeah, you got to have some bubbly if you're going to do the Hey Chris. That is delicious. Cherry tonight. All right. The first question comes from Evan in Lyndhurst. Chris, what is the plan to fix the offense when Donovan Mitchell is off the floor? All right. I don't know that you can really fix the offense when Donovan is off the floor. I think the reality of the NBA is that so many of these offenses these days are heliocentric, right? The Denver Nuggets are going to function different when they don't have Nikola Jokic. The Bucks are not going to be the same high-octane group if they don't have Giannis. Take Shai Gilgeous-Alexander off the Oklahoma City Thunder, see how they function consistently. In a one-night situation, teams can overcome, they can find a way, they can rally together, and they can pick up a win that seems improbable. The Cavs have done that during this stretch without Donovan, without Max Strus, without Dean Wade, and Evan Mobley before Evan came back. So it's not like the Cavs haven't been able to compete and win some of these games, but it's true. Their offense is just not the same when Donovan's off the court. And it's like, no duh, because great players oftentimes transcend systems, X's and O's, and they're able to do things and break down defenses in a different kind of way. Darius Garland is not Donovan Mitchell. Jaren Allen is not the kind of offensive threat that Joel Embiid is, or Nikola Jokic's or Bam Adebayo, where you just run offense through that guy consistently and you feel good about what is going to come from that. He has gotten better offensively, Jarrett Allen has. He's got more of a mid-range game this year. He's passing the ball better. He's being more decisive when he does get the ball. He's got the rip-through move that's been really good. Can finish with the left and the right, those baby hook shots, finishing around the rim. But Jarrett's game is kind of one that's predicated on other guys helping him. It's predicated on Darius getting him involved. It's predicated on Donovan creating those opportunities for Jarrett. So he's just stylistically a different kind of center than some of those other guys that I mentioned. Domas Sabonis, another example. So when Donovan's off the floor, yeah, the Cavs have to do things a little bit differently. They have to try and see every now and then, can we put the ball in the hands of Evan Mobley and have him be an offensive hub? Every now and then, can we put the ball in the hands of Jarrett and have him be an offensive hub? Not every time down, but to diversify the attack so that it's not Darius Garland over and over and over again, or Karis LeVert over and over and over again. But I just think anybody would be foolish to expect the Cavs offense, specifically the offense, to perform at the same level or close to the same level for a consistent stretch when Donovan is not out there. And the numbers back that up. When Donovan is on the court this year, the Cavs have an offensive rating of 116.1, which is basically them functioning like the Sacramento Kings or the New York Knicks. Top half of the league offenses. That's really, really good. When Donovan is off the court, offensively, they drop to 111.2. Now, to put that in perspective, that's basically the offense of the Toronto Raptors. And we understand how bad the Raptors are. They've got a bottom 6 offense this year. So that's the difference. When Donovan's on the floor, Donovan's off the floor. The Cavs go from being the Sacramento Kings, the New York Knicks, in terms of that level of capability, to the Toronto Raptors. And I just don't know that there's an easy fix for that. I don't know that there's a system that they can put in place. I don't know that there's a style that they can lean into without Donovan, because he's so important to everything that they do. I think Tristan Thompson actually said it really, really well following the game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's like, hey, given everything that we're missing, and I think this is another key point, it hasn't only been Donovan that has been missing basically since the All-Star break. MVP caliber Donovan Mitchell that existed for the Cavs at the beginning of the year. The Cavs haven't seen that guy in the second half of the season since he came back from Indianapolis. And first he dealt with the illness, then his knee acted up, then he got bashed in the face by Tristan Thompson and got a nasal fracture. So the MVP version of Donovan Mitchell from the first half of the season, when the Cavs were an elite team, when a lot of people were talking about them being a legitimate Eastern Conference contender, that version of Donovan Mitchell has not shown up as much in the second half. And the Cavs have suffered because of that, because they need Donovan to be great, to be a great team. Just like the 76ers need Embiid to be great, to be great. Just like the Milwaukee Bucks need Giannis to be great, to be great. Just like the Lakers need LeBron to play at a high level for them to consistently compete on a nightly basis. The Warriors need Steph to be an elite offensive player for the Warriors to be at their best. It's like, no, duh. There's a reason why Donovan was in the MVP conversation. There's a reason why he's considered a top 15 player in the game. So Tristan said it really, really well, that because the Cavs have been missing so much firepower on offense, Donovan included, they've had to try and win a different kind of way. And I think maybe the best way to answer this question is not to focus on the offense and what the offense can do during this stretch without Donovan. Right? I think it's to focus on, okay, do the Cavs slow down the game a little bit more? Do they take away some of the possessions? And do they try and consistently win games or compete in games on the defensive end of the floor? Sacrifice a little bit offensively, because you already know that you're at a disadvantage on the offensive end because you're missing so much firepower. So sacrifice in terms of lineups, in terms of minutes, in terms of play style, sacrifice a little bit offensively to lean more into defense if you're just looking for a short-term fix. That, to me, might be the best possible solution short-term. Because again, I just don't think there's a consistent fix to the offense when Donovan is off the floor, because he means that much to them. Next question comes from Ben Y. Ben Y from Akron. he sends this in. What do you think the Cavs will take away from this recent stretch of games without Donovan, Max, and up until recently, Evan? Will they take away anything substantial related to the playoffs, possible rotations and schemes, or will they flush everything given the fact that we were missing 3 starters for the better part of the last month? I also think you have to throw Dean Wade in there. I know the Cavs fan base is not the biggest supporters of Dean Wade, but statistically, he's third in on-off net rating differential. That's a big deal. And the only 2 players on the roster higher than him, that's just one specific category, of course, but the only players higher than him in that category, Donovan Mitchell and Max Strus. So Dean Wade brings an element to this team that they need. The shooting capability, the floor spacing, the versatility, the understanding of where to be offensively, the fact that he's not a high volume guy, the fact that he's not a high touch guy and he can just blend into the fabric of the offense. That matters. He plays to his role very, very well. And that goes beyond the defense that we've talked about a number of times on this podcast. It goes beyond the defense that I've written about a number of times for cleveland.com. So I think you can include Dean in there as well. And we're talking about, for the better part of the last month, the Cavs being without 4 of their top 10 rotational pieces. That's a lot to be missing all at the same time. You're going to feel that. You're going to see that show up. And it's happened. The Cavs have been very, very inconsistent as a team since the All-Star break. I think it's logical that they have been. I think it's justifiable that they have been. And I think the fact that the better part of this last month has been without those 4 guys has allowed them to see different kinds of things. So to answer the question, Ben, I don't think you look at this stretch and say, all right, we're going to do things significantly different when the playoffs come around because we found this, and this in a small sample size without these guys. But I think the thing that's important is that they don't allow this recent stretch to completely go without meaning. So I think it gave them an opportunity to say, okay, how much can we get away with not playing Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley together? And how do we function defensively when those guys are apart? And then I think it allowed them to say, okay, how does Karis LeVert and Darius Garland work together? In late game situations, do we put both of those guys on the floor also with Donovan? What does it look like with Marcus Morris Sr. and George Niang together? What does it look like with Marcus Morris Sr. and Jarrett Allen together? I think it's more about those combinations within the rotations that may have become a little bit more appealing to JB Bickerstaff, that may have become combinations that he may be more willing to go to in a 7-game playoff series because he got to see it in certain stretches. So I think that's the substantial takeaway when you're talking about lineups, rotations, schemes, things like that. The other one is, okay, end of game situation. We understand that teams are going to try and take the ball out of the hands of Donovan. End of game situation. We can't just be so predictable and say, here you go, Donovan, go create something. What did they learn during this stretch about Darius Garland and his ability in those late game moments? What did they learn about Karis LeVert and his ability in those late game moments? What did they learn about Jarrett Allen and his ability in those late game moments? So if teams are going to send 2 at Donovan Mitchell and then the Cavs play 4-on-3 from there, who's the best person to go? I think those things can matter. But in terms of big picture, Donovan Mitchell is going to be a high minute guy. Max Strus is going to be a high minute guy in the playoffs. Evan Mobley obviously is going to be a high minute guy. So big picture, I don't think things can drastically change based on small sample sizes without some of the team's most important players, if that makes sense. Appreciate the question, though. Next one comes from Derek. Derek from South Bend, Indiana. He says, hey, Chris, considering all of the injuries the Cavs have sustained this season, how much will the Cavs' postseason success or lack thereof impact Donovan Mitchell's future with the team? Without getting too over the top and hyperbolic, I think it's everything. I think Donovan at this stage of his career is looking for a situation that is ready to compete for championships the same way that he believes that he is. Donovan has had a bunch of success in the regular season. Happened in Utah. It's happened here in Cleveland. The Cavs won 51 games last year. They got the 4 seed. They got home court advantage in the first round, and they got bounced in a non-competitive series against the Knicks. This year, we'll see what happens the rest of the way, but to this point, the Cavs are right around that same 51 pace. They got 44 wins now. Talked about the Charlotte game on Wednesday being winnable. The Friday game against Philly is winnable. The one against the Jazz coming up, Indiana at the end of the season. So they could get right around 50 again. And I don't want to get into a situation where we start diminishing regular season success. And I don't want to get into a situation where you start poo-pooing 50 wins in the regular season because it's hard. It's hard to consistently play at that level to get that many wins. It's something that the team and the organization, to some degree, should celebrate. Is it the end-all be-all? No. Is it the primary goal? No. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't take pride. If they get to 50 wins, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't take pride in that they should just downplay everything unrelated to the postseason. Now, in saying that, when we're talking about Donovan specifically, Donovan's different. Donovan has already shown that he can win in the regular season. Donovan has already shown that he can win a playoff series. What he hasn't shown is an ability to get past the second round of the playoffs. And Donovan now, a multi-time All-Star, a guy who seems like he's in the MVP conversation every single season. He can't be in the conversation this year because he's not going to qualify for end of season awards because he did not hit the 65 game threshold, the new rule, 65 games. So he's not going to hit that. But when he was healthy and when he was playing for the Cavs, he was in the MVP conversation. So he's worked his way into that caliber player. Now the question is, can that regular season success that he has shown individually and from a team perspective, can that translate to the playoffs at the highest level? He's starting to get a reputation as the guy who is an 82-game player as opposed to a 16-game player. And he needs to show that he can be a 16-game player. The way for him to do that is to win at the highest level in the postseason. So I think Donovan feels like he's ready to compete for championships. He's ready to take the next step in his career. And I think he is looking at it, saying to himself, is Darius Garland ready? Is there a level of maturity when it comes to playoff basketball that Jarrett Allen has, that Evan Mobley has, that if I commit to the Cavs, if I stay here long-term, this organization, this team, and these players are going to give me the best chance to compete at the highest level, which is ultimately what I want for my career. And if that answer is yes, because Darius shows up in the first round series and he has a great series against whoever it is, or Evan Mobley shows a level of readiness that he did not show last year against the Knicks, or Jarrett Allen bounces back from a terrible playoff series last year against New York, then I think it's easier for Donovan to justify and look at the situation and say, you know what? There probably isn't a better basketball situation out there for me. That if I were to leave all of this behind, I would be taking a huge risk in my career. It may be better for me to stay with what I know, what's most comfortable, and what I've seen be successful. Now, this is, again, all predicated on the Cavs having success in the postseason. And that's why I think for Donovan Mitchell, it's everything because he wants to win. He wants to prove people wrong. He wants to start shaking this reputation that is starting to be built around him. And the only way for him to do that is to perform well individually in the postseason, but have team success in the postseason, the kind that he hasn't had up to this point in his career. Now, if the Cavs flame out in the first round, and Donovan's great, but Darius doesn't step up, Evan Mobley struggles, Jarrett Allen struggles, JB Bickerstaff gets outcoached again the way that he did against the Knicks and Tom Thibodeau, then I think it becomes easier for Donovan to say, okay, maybe I am happy here in Cleveland. Maybe there are things that I like about this situation, but not enough of them yet for me to fully commit to this group of players, to this organization. I'm not going to give up the remainder of my prime years and stay in Cleveland on a team that just got bounced out of the first round of the playoffs by the Indiana Pacers or the Miami Heat. If that is the scenario that plays itself out, then I think Donovan looks around the landscape of the NBA and says, is there a place where I could go where there is more readiness to compete for a championship than what exists in Cleveland? Is it the Los Angeles Lakers? Is it the Miami Heat? Is there a way to get me to the New York Knicks? But I think what happens in this year's playoff series for the Cavs will matter greatly when it comes to Donovan making the decision on his long-term extension. In saying all of that, the thing that I do know, the thing that I've relayed multiple times is that Donovan is very happy in this situation. He believes in this team. He believes in his teammates at this point. He believes in the direction of this organization. He was a part of the offseason moves to bring in Max Strus and George Niang. And of course, he organized team get-togethers in the offseason. So he has acted like a guy who is all in on this organization. And he said privately in the locker room, but loud enough for me to hear, that he is happy as hell where he's at. And his actions back that up as well. So it will be interesting to see. And I definitely think it matters what happens in the first round of the playoffs. This one comes from Joe in Chicago. Says, are the injuries with Wade, Mitchell, and Strus serious in that it's questionable whether they'll be good enough to play in the next few weeks? Or is it more the Cavs want them to be fully healthy and as close to 100% as possible before the playoffs come? And if we drop a few games now, they aren't as concerned. Thanks, Joe from Chicago. Strus could be back Wednesday against Charlotte. I would not be surprised by that at all. All of the signs that I got that were related to Evan Mobley and his return from his ankle injury the other day, those are the same signs that I'm getting when it comes to Max. That's the same vibe that I'm getting. There's the same level of optimism coming from the organization on Max's ability to play Wednesday in Charlotte. Obviously, the Cavs are going to have shoot around Wednesday morning. How does he come out of that? His pregame workout might be important. How does he come from that? But Max is very, very close. Like I said, could be Wednesday against Charlotte. When it comes to Dean Wade, I was told from a source that he had an MRI last weekend, not this past weekend, but last weekend. It didn't show any structural damage. The Cavs are calling it a knee sprain. When it comes to Dean Wade, it is no longer just knee soreness. It's a knee sprain. There is hope, from what I'm hearing, that Dean is going to get back on the court in some capacity in terms of on-court workouts at some point this week. And the hope is that he's back before the end of this month. And then when it comes to Donovan, it's a little bit tricky because he's got two things that he's dealing with. Right? Everybody knows that he got bashed in the face by Tristan. He's got the nasal fracture, and then he was reevaluated when it came to that. But beyond that, he's got the sore knee that was problematic for him. And it was basically the one that in that Houston game, he was ready to shut it down for a few days, maybe even a few weeks before he suffered the nasal fracture. In the locker room after that Houston game, he wasn't really talking about his broken nose. He was talking about his knee and how problematic that was and how he wasn't himself and he couldn't blow by defenders and he didn't have the same stop and start and he didn't have the same lateral agility and he didn't have the same ability to create separation and space off the dribble to get those jump shots off in a way that he did at the beginning of the year. He didn't have the ability to explode to the rim and get rebounds and soar to the basket and all that kind of stuff that makes Donovan Donovan. That's what he was talking about. It wasn't about his broken nose. So when you combine the broken nose with the knee stuff that he is still dealing with, I think the Cavs are going to be cautious, and I think Donovan is going to be cautious. Because I think when it came to him coming back against New Orleans, the Cavs were in a bad place. They weren't playing good basketball. They were losing games. They were dropping in the standings, and Donovan was having a hard time with that. And he said, hey, I may not be 100%. I may not be myself, but are there other things that I can do on the court to impact this team in a positive way? Can I be a decoy? Can I space the floor? Can I take some pressure off of Darius Garland and Karis LeVert? Can I do a little playmaking? Can I just break down defenses and then create for my teammates? Can I bring some gravity to the court? Can I bring some spirit to this team that may be lacking right now? Can I bring some belief to this team that may be lacking right now? And Donovan did that. In his return game against New Orleans, he did that. But then against Houston, he just didn't feel like his body was allowing him to do the things that his mind thought he should have been able to. And so I think that was an eye-opener for him, that his knee needed more time. And he looked at the schedule and said, for me, for this team, it's not about March. It's about mid-April and May. And it's about trying to get myself to a place where I'm close to 100%, as close to 100% as I can possibly be, close to full strength, so that I can be Donovan bleeping Mitchell, the guy that this organization needs in a first round playoff series. And he even said to me in a private conversation something along the lines of, it's not about right now. There's a bigger picture in play. I've got to be smart when it comes to us in the playoffs. So that gave me the sense that there was an understanding from Donovan that his knee was bothersome enough that he needed as much time as possible to recover, to get treatment, to rest, so that he could be the best version of himself or close to that version for the playoffs. And I think that is the one that the Cavs will probably be most cautious with. I think Donovan will be cautious with that one too. But I don't think it's a situation where all of these guys are going to be out until the playoffs, because the other thing that each one of them wants is a little bit of time going into the playoffs to build back up, to get back in rhythm. If you remember, Isaac Okoro suffered an injury at the end of last regular season, and then going into the playoffs, like, he didn't have that ramp up period. The schedule didn't allow him to get back into a rhythm. And he didn't feel right, he said, in the first couple of games in that series against the Knicks. So if the Cavs can control it, if these players can control it, they'll want to be back and get some meaningful game reps before the playoffs come. Because going from, a lengthy absence into playoff basketball is going to be a striking thing. And it's probably not going to be the best situation for those guys individually or for the Cavs as a team. So I do think that there is going to be an opportunity for all of these guys to get meaningful game reps toward the end of the season and have enough time to build up a rhythm, build up an understanding of what they can do, what they can't do physically, based on getting back before the regular season comes to an end. All right, and the final question comes from Brett. Brett wants to know, what are the odds that the Cavs come to an agreement on a standard deal with Marcus Morris Sr. after his 10-day is up? Well, just in terms of rules, they could do that, or they could give him another 10-day and see if he can get a little bit of a longer audition and see if indeed he is the right fit for this team on the court and off the court. All signs are good. He has come into a situation, he has gotten extended playing time because multiple guys that the Cavs would have been able to play at the power forward spot, or even the three, because the Cavs have dabbled with Marcus Morris Sr. at the three as well. They've been missing bodies at those two positions. So it's given him an opportunity to showcase what he can still be on the court. Off the court, there are no questions. He's got a relationship with JB Bickerstaff. It goes back to their time together in Houston when Morris was a rookie and his second year, and JB was an assistant at that time. So JB knows the kind of personality that Morris has. He knows how he fits behind the scenes. He knows his leadership capabilities. He knows the value that he brings to a locker room. It's about on the court. Is he good enough on the court to justify giving him a standard deal? To say, we may need him in a playoff series. We may need to give him minutes in a playoff series because there are concerns with George Niang's ability to hold up on defense. Or what if Dean Wade is still bothered by his knee and he's a shell of himself and he's not very confident and he's more like the guy in the New York series last year? Morris would give them insurance, some protection, and some depth coming off the bench. He also has more experience. He's got more know-how. That matters in a 7-game series. So I get the sense that what the Cavs have seen on the court from Morris, they like. What the Cavs have seen behind the scenes, they like as well. But they have a lot of leverage here, and they don't have to rush into something. They can give him another 10-day contract, or they could give him a standard contract. I don't think it's a make or break situation either way. I think there's more positives than negatives to the situation. And I get the sense that his audition has gone well enough that the Cavs will want to keep him on board. They will want to have him on this playoff roster as I said, insurance, depth, just in case something happens. You never know. You want to have as many different ways of playing as possible. You want to have as many different guys that you can trust as possible. You want to have as many different ways to play in terms of, do we have to go big? Do we have to go small? Do we have to go 4 guards and 1 big? Do we go 2 bigs? Do we go 1 big and 4 shooters? Different ways to play stylistically is important, and different kinds of lineups and rotations that you can use in a playoff series also important. And it may not be consistent in terms of the playing time for Morris. It may not be consistent in terms of the playoff playing time for Dean Wade or Georges Niang. It may be a situation of who's playing best. What do we need on that night? What kinds of adjustments are they making? How do we counter those? What skill set do we need out there? Do we need a little bit more toughness? Do we need a little bit more switchability? Do we need a little bit more shooting? Do we need somebody who can create in one-on-one situations the way that Marcus Morris Sr. can? Not all of those questions are going to lead to Morris. Some of them will lead to Wade. Some of them will lead to Niang. But you want to have as many playable bodies on this roster. And at the very least, during this stretch, although it was not a great stretch from a team standpoint for the Cavs, Morris showed that he can be helpful. He showed that there is a place for him on the floor in certain lineups against certain teams. And to have that guy as like the 11th guy, the 12th guy in the rotation, I think the Cavs will see a benefit to that. And I do believe that they're going to give him a standard deal. I don't know if it's going to be after this particular 10-day or a second 10-day, but I do believe that they're going to give him a standard deal because I do believe JB Bickerstaff wants him. And I do believe the front office has seen the kind of value that he brings both on and off the court. And the other thing is, folks, I mean, the buyout market was thin to begin with. There weren't that many appealing options. So it's not like there's somebody else just sitting out there in free agency waiting to be signed by the Cavs or somebody else that's going to drastically impact the team's chances, or somebody that JB Bickerstaff will trust enough, knows well enough to bring into this situation this late into the season and say, okay, this guy's going to get some kind of workload in the playoffs potentially. There's a comfort between the coach and this particular player that goes back more than a decade that has allowed this transition to be a little bit more smooth than sometimes these buyout ones are. So I don't know that there's somebody else that's sitting out there that's going to give the Cavs more than what Morris already has or what he could in a playoff series, one that JB is going to trust to the same level. And I don't think that there's a guy out there. If you remember last year, toward the end of the season, the Cavs brought up Sam Merrill and they gave him a standard contract because they needed shooting. And yeah, it was a little bit of a short-term play, but that was more of a big picture play. That was more of a long-term type thing. And we've seen the Cavs get rewarded for that this year at various points. I don't think that there's a player out there like that that's just chilling in the G League somewhere that the Cavs call up or sign to a standard NBA deal like they did with Sam Merrill and say, we're going to get enough in the short term and we're going to get some benefit of that one long term as well. If that guy existed, then maybe the Cavs would be a little bit more hesitant on this Morris thing because it's an option that they would have theoretically, but I don't get that sense and I don't see that kind of player out there. So to me, everything points to him getting a standard deal. It's just a matter of when, not if. All right. Those are all the questions that we have tonight on this edition of Hey Chris. Ethan will be back in the next podcast episode. We'll have the Charlotte game to react to. We'll probably get into the West Coast trip that's coming up as well. And don't forget, Subtext, $3.99 a month, 14-day free trial. Get news, information, analysis sent straight to your phone. Interact with me and Ethan during games. It's essentially a community of Cavs fans, and you have access that others don't. You can send a question to us for Hey Chris. It goes right to the phone, and then we'll bookmark that so that we save it for the Hey Chris episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Or you could just send us a question and we don't use it in Hey Chris and we just respond to you on your phone. That's another option that you have as well. It's basically like texting with your buddies while also receiving other observations and behind the scenes scoops that don't always make it to X, formerly Twitter. Earlier today, Cavs Insiders got the injury update on Max Strus. It was sent right to them on their phone. He's been upgraded to questionable. There are also a few nuggets about what we've observed when it comes to Max behind the scenes in his recovery and the steps that he's taken to get back and all that kind of stuff. So if you feel like you're missing out on stuff related to the Cavs, and you want more news, you want more information, you want more analysis, you want more thoughts from guys that are there in the trenches around this team on a daily basis, sign up. Cavs Insider, subtext, $3.99 a month, 14-day free trial. The people who sign up tell us all the time how much they love the service. So what are you waiting for? Join the Cavs Insider community today. Go to cleveland.com/Cavs. Sign up right there on the homepage. That'll do it. Hey, Chris, in the books. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. See ya.